In 1962, a young American officer survived the brutal SAS selection, where 90% failed, and went home determined to copy what he called the most professional soldiers I had ever seen. The British believed they had ignited an elite legacy they could guide. Instead, their blueprint triggered a 15-year clash with the Pentagon, fears of uncontrollable soldiers, and a revolution no one could predict. How did one deliberate gift fracture control forever? Subscribe now, because the secrets start here. Captain Charles Beckwith arrived in Malaya in 1962. A Green Beret dropped into the heart of 22 SAS Regiment. He joined patrols deep in the jungle, living shoulder to shoulder with men who measured worth by grit, not by rank. The British selection process was unlike anything he had seen. Candidates faced the Brecon beacons with heavy packs, navigating alone across brutal terrain. 90% failed, often within days. Those who made it through did so by proving relentless initiative and self-discipline, not by flashing stripes or medals. Beckwith watched as small teams vanished for weeks behind enemy lines, supplied with little more than what they could carry. Decisions were made on the ground, not handed down from headquarters. The culture was direct, experience outranked position, and mistakes were owned in full view. After a year, Beckwith called SAS the most professional soldiers he had ever seen. He returned to the United States convinced America lacked anything close. In his reports, he insisted the United States needed a unit built around the same unforgiving standards, one that could go anywhere, survive on its own, and win by thinking on its feet. The British had opened their doors, confident their philosophy would be adopted in spirit. They never imagined how far the lesson would travel or how quickly it would slip beyond their reach. Subscribe to see how elite military units actually operate behind the curtain. We are breaking down stories no one else will tell. For 15 years, every proposal to create an American SAS met a dead end. Beckwith's reports landed on Pentagon desks only to be dismissed and labeled as plans for uncontrollable units that would threaten the chain of command. Senior officers feared a force built on initiative and autonomy could undermine the strict hierarchy the military depended on. The idea of elite soldiers making decisions in the field without waiting for orders was too much for leaders shaped by conventional warfare. The world outside was changing. Terrorist attacks grew more frequent and more deadly. When Black September stormed the Olympic Village in Munich in 1972, killing 11 Israeli athletes, Beckwith pointed to the chaos as proof the U.S. had no answer for this new kind of threat. Still, his calls for a dedicated counterterrorism unit were buried under bureaucracy. Memos from the era described special operations as a risk to discipline, with some generals arguing that conventional forces could handle any crisis. Through it all, the British watched from a distance, offering quiet encouragement but never stepping in. They assumed American red tape would keep any SAS-inspired unit small and tightly controlled. For Beckwith, the rejections only deepened his resolve. The gap between what he had seen in Malaya and what the Pentagon allowed grew wider every year. Subscribe to see how elite military units actually operate behind the curtain. We're breaking down stories no one else will tell. April 24, 1980. 8 RH-53D helicopters lifted off from U.S. Nimitz, flying more than 600 miles into the Iranian desert. The target was a remote site called Desert 1, where Delta Force and other U.S. teams waited to launch a rescue of 52 hostages in Tehran. The plan depended on at least 6 helicopters making it through. 3 never arrived. 1 was lost to a cracked rotor blade, another to a malfunctioning hydraulic system, and a third was forced down by blinding dust storms that swept across the desert without warning. The remaining 5 helicopters landed, but that was not enough. As the mission was called off, disaster struck. In the darkness and swirling dust, one helicopter drifted into a parked C-130 during refueling, igniting a fireball that killed 8 men instantly. The operation ended with bodies left behind, wreckage smoldering in the sand, and the world watching the United States humiliated on live television. The cost of failure was measured in lives and global credibility. Congress responded within months of the Desert One disaster. In October 1980, the Department of Defense activated the Joint Special Operations Command, JSOC, tasked with unifying command and control of elite units across the military. For the first time, special operations teams from the Army, Navy, and Air Force were brought under a single authority, ending the ad hoc, fragmented planning that had plagued earlier missions. Simultaneously, the Pentagon ordered the creation of a dedicated aviation regiment, the 160th Special Operations Aviation Regiment, soon known as the Night Stalkers. This unit specialized in flying helicopters at low altitude, in darkness, and under fire, precisely the skills that had been missing in Iran. Funding channels were opened, bypassing traditional bottlenecks, and new policies gave special operations forces direct access to resources once reserved for entire divisions. These reforms built a framework where rapid innovation and inter-service cooperation became not just possible, but expected. The system was now designed for speed, flexibility, and relentless adaptation. Delta Force selection opened with a challenge straight out of the British playbook. Candidates found themselves alone in the Appalachian Mountains, carrying heavy rucksacks and navigating routes that grew longer and more punishing by the day. There were no teams to lean on, no clear finish lines, just a map, a compass, and the weight of uncertainty. The distances changed without warning, and the only way to pass was to keep moving, no matter how exhausted or disoriented. Every step was a test of endurance and judgment, echoing the SAS belief that only those who could think and survive on their own deserved a place in the unit. The attrition rate told the story. Out of every 100 who started, barely 10 to 15 finished. Those who made it through faced a final board of anonymous instructors, psychological interviews designed to strip away bravado and expose real character. The process built a force that looked on the surface like a mirror image of the SAS, small groups, flat hierarchy, and a relentless focus on individual resilience. By the 1990s, Delta Force operated with resources the British could hardly imagine. Annual budgets soared into the hundreds of millions, funding a support network that dwarfed the unit itself. For every operator on a mission, there were often 3 or 4 specialists behind the scenes: intelligence analysts, communications experts, logistics planners, and medical staff, bringing the total Delta personnel to more than 1,000. At Fort Bragg, Delta built facilities that rivaled small towns, with dedicated ranges, full-scale mock-ups of targets, and entire compounds for rehearsals. When Task Force 20 hunted Saddam Hussein in 2003, Delta's planners drew on this deep well. Operations were mapped out in classified rooms, rehearsed in life-size replicas, and supported by real-time satellite feeds. The SAS, by comparison, fielded around 300 operators with minimal backup, relying on speed and improvisation. The American approach, shaped by near-limitless funding, allowed for a style of precision warfare that was simply out of reach for the British. Delta Force and the SAS found themselves side by side in Iraq, hunting al-Qaeda targets as part of Task Force Black. American operators brought a level of precision and technological integration that reshaped every mission. They mapped targets with real-time satellite feeds, rehearsed assaults in full-scale mock-ups, and coordinated with intelligence teams numbering in the hundreds. The SAS moved faster, often pushing for immediate action based on local networks and gut instinct. Friction surfaced as British teams accused Delta of delaying raids for more planning, while Delta questioned the reliability of British-supplied intelligence. In 2006, a British tip was dismissed by Delta and later proved accurate, fueling quiet resentment. 4 years later, Delta declined to join a British-led operation they deemed too risky, drawing criticism for excessive caution. Meanwhile, the American approach to publicity marked another divide. Former Delta operators published memoirs with government approval and appeared in documentaries, moves that would end SAS careers. The British code demanded silence, while the American system allowed operators to shape their own legacy. In every joint campaign, command lines ran back to U.S. headquarters. Consultation was courtesy, not obligation. The SAS had given Delta its foundation, but any hope of control was gone. Become an exclusive member for military stories never making news, the rivalries, tension, truth. Britain's blueprint built an equal, not a clone. Today, Delta operates beyond any foreign influence, shaped by technology, scale, and American priorities. As global threats evolve, which philosophy prevails matters for every future crisis. Power, once shared, now answers only to those who control its resources. Let us talk below.